Welcome. Today we are diving deep into the wisdom of Surah Al-Qasas. We're going to peel back the layers and really explore how these ancient stories offer some incredibly timeless and practical lessons about, human psychology, ethics, and our relationship with the divine. So right off the bat, we have to ask a really fundamental question when we approach a text like this. Are we just reading history? I mean, when the Quran talks about past prophets and nations, is it just a record of stuff that happened a long time ago? Or is there something much, much deeper going on? Honestly, the answer to this question is the key that unlocks everything else we're going to talk about. All right, so here's our roadmap. First, we're going to see why these are so much more than just stories. They're actually tools for guidance. Then we'll explore how they connect to this idea of one single timeless faith. After that, we'll get into the psychology of denial. What stops people from seeing the truth? Next up, a really radical ethic for dealing with conflict. And we'll wrap it all up by completely rethinking what it means to be blessed with sustenance. So, let's get into it. What's the real point of these stories? The commentary makes a powerful argument that if we read them just as history, we're missing the entire point. They aren't here for our entertainment. They're designed to be a manual for active guidance in our lives. You see, the Arabic term used for these stories, qasas, tells us so much. It doesn't just mean a story. It implies a purpose, a lesson that follows. These aren't just random chronicles of the past. Every single account is chosen, framed, and told in a specific way to be a lesson, a point of reflection, and a guide for how we should act, not just back then, but right now. And this right here is the core idea. The commentary points out that the story of Pharaoh isn't really about a specific king in ancient Egypt. It's meant to be a mirror. The whole purpose is to make us look inside ourselves and find the Pharaoh that can exist in all of us, that arrogance, that need for control, that denial of a higher truth. And it's also about seeing that same dynamic in the power structures of our own modern world. And this whole idea of timeless guidance leads us perfectly into our next point. See, the Quran doesn't present its message as something brand new out of nowhere. Instead, it frames itself as the final piece in a long, continuous chain of divine revelation that spans all of human history. The text really highlights the reaction of some of the people of the book. That's the term the Quran uses for communities who received earlier scriptures, like Jews and Christians. And what's fascinating is that when sincere believers from these traditions heard the Quran, they didn't see it as a contradiction. They saw it as a confirmation. They basically said, hey, we already believed in this core truth from our own scriptures. We were already on this path of submission to God. And then comes this incredible promise. These individuals are told they'll get a double reward. So why double? The commentary explains it's for two separate patient acts. First, for patiently holding on to the truth they originally had. And second, for having the humility and intellectual honesty to embrace that same truth when it was presented in its final form. It's a reward for both their consistency and their open-mindedness. Okay, so if the truth is this clear, this continuous, why doesn't everybody just accept it? Well, our next section dives right into the psychology of rejection, looking at the internal roadblocks that actually prevent people from accepting guidance. This verse just cuts straight to the heart of the issue. It suggests that the biggest obstacle to truth isn't a lack of evidence. It's not about being smart enough. The real problem is when a person puts their own ego, their own whims, their own desires ahead of objective divine guidance. It's a choice to follow yourself instead of the truth. The commentary then breaks down the root causes for this denial. And it's fascinating because it's all about psychology, not logic. You have arrogance, that inner voice saying, I know better. There's the powerful pull of tradition, following what our parents and grandparents did, not because it's right, but just because it's what we've always done. Then there's the fear of loss, the worry that accepting this truth will cost you friends, status, or power. And really, underpinning it all is that basic human tendency to just follow our own immediate desires over a higher, sometimes more difficult principle. So once we understand these internal roadblocks, it brings up a very practical question. How are believers supposed to interact with people who are hostile or reject them? The text pivots here, moving from our inner psychology to a really profound ethic for how to handle conflict and negativity from others.
First things first, the text establishes the baseline for justice. This is the principle of reciprocity, or qisas. It means if someone harms you, you have the right to equal justice, an eye for an eye. This is what creates order and stops endless cycles of revenge. It's the foundation. But then, the Quran takes it to a whole other level. It introduces a principle that's not just about justice, but about ihsan, or sublime virtue. It says, repel an evil act with one that is better.
This is so much more than just forgiving and forgetting. It's about actively transforming a negative situation into a positive one. It's about breaking the cycle of evil completely, not just balancing the scale.
So, how do you actually do that? It sounds really hard, right? Well, the commentary explains it as a two-step process. Step 1 is internal, patience. It's that moment of self-control where you absorb the negativity without lashing back, without letting your anger take over. But you don't stop there. Step 2 is external. You take a proactive, virtuous action. You respond to an insult with a kind word. You meet injustice with an act of generosity. It's this 1-2 punch of patience and positive action that has the real power to change hearts.
To live up to that incredibly high ethical standard, you have to have a deep sense of gratitude for what you've been given. And that brings us to our final section, which challenges our whole definition of blessings and sustenance. It asks us to look way beyond just money and material things.
This little phrase keeps appearing in the description of righteous people, and from what we have provided them, they spend. Now, the obvious interpretation is, they donate money to charity, but the commentary pushes us to ask a deeper question. What does that phrase, what we have provided, really include? Is it just wealth?
And this is where our whole perspective just blows wide open. The commentary explains that rizq, or divine sustenance, means every gift from God. Yes, it's money, but it's also your knowledge, which you can spend by teaching others. It's your health, which you can spend by helping someone who is weak. It's your time, which you can spend on a good cause. It's even your faith, which you can spend by guiding someone who feels lost.
This completely redefines what it means to be a giving person. True gratitude, true charity, isn't just about writing a check. It's about doing a full audit of all your blessings, your talents, your health, your position, your time, and then actively spending from each of those accounts to make the world better. That's the real, holistic meaning of giving back. And that brings us to the end of our journey. We've gone from seeing stories as a roadmap for life, to understanding the psychology of why people reject truth, to that high standard of repelling evil with good, and finally, to redefining what it even means to be blessed. So, the question I'll leave you with is this: which one of these powerful ancient principles from this text could you apply to your life today?